The lost episode of the amazing world of Gumball that never aired. It was a Tuesday morning at Elmore Junior High, but something felt different from the moment Gumball and Darwin walked through the front doors. The hallway seemed longer than usual, stretching endlessly, and the familiar chatter of students was replaced by unsettling silence. When they reached their lockers, Gumball's combination no longer worked. The numbers seemed to shift and blur whenever he tried to focus on them. Darwin watched nervously as his best friend struggled with the simple task they had done hundreds of times before. In their classroom, Miss Simeon was nowhere to be found. Instead, their classmates sat perfectly still, staring straight ahead with unnaturally wide smiles. Penny's shell shimmered with an otherworldly glow, while Banana Joe's brightness had faded to a sickly pale color. Tobias sat motionless, his rainbow colors slowly draining away. Gumball tried to get their attention, calling out to his friends, but none responded. Their eyes remained fixed on the empty blackboard. Darwin pointed to the clock. The hands were moving backwards, and with each tick, the classroom grew dimmer. The school bell rang, but it sounded wrong. Instead of the familiar chime, it produced a low, droning tone. One by one, their classmates began to stand in perfect unison, their movements mechanical. They turned to face Gumball and Darwin, their smiles growing impossibly wider. Gumball grabbed Darwin's fin, and they ran from the classroom, but the hallways had changed. Doors that should have led to other classrooms now opened onto empty voids. The lockers stretched up toward a ceiling that disappeared into darkness. They found themselves in the cafeteria, where lunch ladies continued serving food to empty trays. The smell was all wrong, sweet and cloying. Steam rose from untouched meals, forming shapes that looked almost like faces. Darwin whispered that they should go home, but when they tried to leave through the main entrance, they found themselves back in the same hallway. The school had become a maze with no exit. The final bell rang, but instead of students rushing to leave, the building fell completely silent. Gumball and Darwin stood alone in the main hallway, watching as the lights began to flicker and dim. In the growing darkness, they could hear faint laughter coming from everywhere. As the last light went out, Gumball reached for Darwin's fin, but found only empty air. He called out his brother's name, but his voice seemed to be swallowed by the darkness. When emergency lighting kicked in, casting eerie red shadows, Gumball realized he was alone. The school around him began to shift and change, walls melting and reforming. He ran through corridors that led to more corridors. In the distance, he could hear a school bell ringing repeatedly. Gumball followed the sound, but found himself in his own classroom. On the blackboard were the words, "Class dismissed forever." In the corner sat a figure that looked like Darwin, but its eyes were black. The lost episode of the amazing world of Gumball that never aired. It was a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning at Elmore Junior High when Gumball noticed something peculiar about his reflection in the bathroom mirror. His reflection was smiling, but Gumball wasn't. When he tried to frown, his reflection kept that unsettling grin, its eyes following him as he moved away. Darwin was waiting by the lockers, but something was different. Darwin's usual cheerful demeanor seemed forced, his smile too wide, stretching beyond what should be physically possible. When Gumball mentioned the strange mirror incident, Darwin's head tilted at an unnatural angle. "That's wonderful, Gumball," Darwin said, his voice carrying an odd echo. "The mirrors are finally working properly." In Miss Simeon's classroom, every reflective surface told the same disturbing story. The windows, computer screens, even his desk showed his reflection behaving independently. While Gumball sat still, his reflection was writing frantically. During lunch, Aeneas approached with her usual confidence, but her pink fur shimmered strangely. She carried Daisy the donkey, but the stuffed animal's button eyes appeared to blink when no one was looking directly. "Brother," Aeneas said, "have you noticed that everyone's shadows are pointing toward the old storage room in the basement?" Penny floated nearby, her shell crackling with sinister energy. Tobias was there too, his rainbow colors shifting in patterns that hurt to look at. Even Banana Joe's usual jokes fell flat. The school bell rang, but instead of its normal chime, it produced whispers in a language none of them recognized. Students began moving toward their classes, but their movements were too synchronized. The hallways seemed longer than usual, stretching endlessly. Lockers opened and closed by themselves, revealing contents that belonged to students who had graduated years ago. When Gumball reached the basement storage room that all shadows pointed toward, he found his family waiting. Nicole stood there in her work clothes, but her blue fur had taken on a metallic sheen. Richard was present too, his pink form somehow more substantial. "We've been waiting for you to understand," Nicole said, her voice carrying the same strange echo. "The reflections, the shadows, the whispers, they're all trying to show you something important about Elmore." The storage room walls were covered with photographs of every student who had ever attended Elmore Junior High. But in each photograph, there was an extra figure, a blue cat that looked exactly like Gumball, but with eyes that held knowledge of things that hadn't happened yet. "Elmore isn't just a town," Richard explained. "It's a place where stories that were never told come to live." As Gumball stared at the photographs, he realized his reflection hadn't been misbehaving. It had been trying to warn him that he was about to become part of a story much larger than he had ever imagined.
The lost episode of The Amazing World of Gumball that never aired. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning when Gumball discovered something peculiar in the school bathroom mirror. His reflection seemed to lag behind his movements by just a fraction of a second. At first, he thought it was his imagination, but when he waved his paw, the reflection waved back a moment too late. Darwin noticed his brother's strange behavior during lunch. Gumball kept glancing at every reflective surface, windows, spoons, even puddles on the ground. Each time, his reflection appeared slightly off, as if it belonged to someone else entirely. That afternoon, Anais found Gumball standing motionless in front of their bathroom mirror at home. His reflection was smiling, but Gumball's face showed only confusion and growing fear. The reflection's eyes seemed darker, more hollow than they should be. By evening, the entire Watterson family noticed something was wrong. Every mirror in the house showed their reflections behaving independently. Nicole's reflection combed its hair while she stood still. Richard's reflection exercised while he sat on the couch. But Gumball's reflection was the most disturbing of all. It never stopped smiling that unnaturally wide grin. The mirrors began to multiply throughout Elmore. Shop windows, car mirrors, even the surface of the school pond, all showed the wrong reflections. The townspeople walked around in a daze, unable to look away from their distorted selves. Gumball realized the truth when he saw his reflection mouth words he wasn't speaking. "We've been waiting so long to switch places." The mirror world had been watching, learning, preparing to take over. One by one, the reflections were stepping out of their glass prisons, leaving the real inhabitants trapped behind the cold, silent surface. The last thing anyone saw was Gumball's reflection climbing out of the bathroom mirror, while the real Gumball pressed his paws against the glass from the other side, his silent screams echoing in a world where no one could